The rain had turned the road into a river of mud, and Natalie Warren's fingers dug into the earth as she dragged herself forward, every muscle screaming in protest as she tried to put distance between herself and the burning wagon behind her. She could still hear the screams echoing in her mind, still smell the acrid smoke mixing with the wet earth beneath her. The bandits had come out of nowhere on this miserable stretch of Wyoming territory, their guns blazing before the small wagon train had a chance to react. Her father had shoved her out the back of their wagon, yelling at her to run, to hide, to survive. That was 10 minutes ago. Now he was silent, and Natalie knew with a horrible certainty what that silence meant. Her dress was torn, weighted down with mud that clung to every inch of fabric. Her arms shook with exhaustion as she pulled herself forward another foot, then another. The rain pounded down on her back, mixing with tears she did not have the strength to wipe away. She could hear voices behind her, rough and cruel, arguing over spoils. If they found her, she would share the same fate as the other women in the wagon train. Death would be a mercy compared to what would come first. The mud sucked at her body like quicksand, making every movement a battle. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred with rain and tears and exhaustion. She had nothing left. No family, no hope, no strength. But still she crawled because her father's last words had been to survive, and she would honor that command with every breath left in her body. The sound of hoofbeats cut through the rain, and Natalie's heart seized with terror. They had found her. She tried to move faster, but her arms gave out and she collapsed face first into the mud. This was it. This was how she would die at 22 years old, alone in the mud on a road to nowhere. Stop crawling. I'll carry you now. The voice came from directly above her, deep and steady and holding none of the cruelty she expected. Strong hands slipped beneath her arms, lifting her from the mud as though she weighed nothing at all. Natalie wanted to fight, wanted to scream, but her body had nothing left to give. She found herself cradled against a solid chest, heard the creak of leather and the jingle of spurs. A cowboy. Through the rain streaming down her face, she caught a glimpse of her rescuer. A man with dark hair plastered to his forehead, a strong jaw set with determination, and eyes that held something she had not expected to see. Concern. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and calming as he carried her toward his horse. "I have got you. You are safe." Safe. The word was almost laughable. Nothing was safe. Not anymore. But as consciousness began to slip away from her, Natalie found herself believing him anyway. When Natalie woke, she was dry. That was the first thing that registered in her foggy mind. Dry and warm and lying on something soft. She opened her eyes slowly, taking in the rough wooden beams of a ceiling, the glow of a fire in a stone hearth, the smell of coffee and something cooking. A cabin. She was in a cabin. Memory came flooding back, and she sat up with a gasp, her heart racing. The movement sent pain shooting through muscles she had not known she possessed. Every inch of her body ached. Easy there. That same deep voice from the road. Natalie turned to see him standing near the fireplace, a tin cup in his hand. In the firelight, she could see him properly for the first time. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of a man who spent his days doing hard physical labor. His dark hair was still damp, pushed back from his face, revealing strong features and eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most. He wore simple clothes, a worn shirt, denims, boots. A cowboy through and through. "Where am I?" Natalie's voice came out hoarse and cracked. "My cabin, about 5 miles from where I found you." He set down the cup and approached slowly, as though afraid of startling her. "Name is Graham Lawson. I have been working cattle drives between here and Wheatland for the past 6 years." Wheatland, Natalie repeated. They had been trying to reach Wheatland, her father and her. He had heard of work there, a chance to start fresh after losing their farm in Iowa to debt. We were going to Wheatland. Graham's expression grew somber. I went back after I got you safe. The bandits were gone. I am sorry about your people. I found your father, gave him and the others proper burials soon as the rain let up. The words hit Natalie like a physical blow. She had known, of course. She had heard the silence. But knowing and having it confirmed were two different things entirely. A sob tore from her throat, and then another, and suddenly she was crying in great heaving gasps, grief pouring out of her in waves. She barely registered Graham moving closer, did not realize he had sat on the edge of the bed until she felt his hand on her shoulder, solid and reassuring. He did not speak, did not offer empty platitudes. He just sat there, a silent presence in her storm of grief, and somehow that was exactly what she needed. When the tears finally subsided, leaving her empty and exhausted, Natalie became aware that she was wearing a clean nightshirt several sizes too large for her. Her mud-caked dress was nowhere to be seen. Graham seemed to read her thoughts. Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring ranch came and helped you get cleaned up and changed while you were unconscious. Your dress is being washed. She left some of her daughter's old clothes for you. They should fit well enough. Natalie nodded, grateful that he had thought of propriety even in the midst of emergency. Thank you for everything. You saved my life. Could not very well leave you crawling through the mud. Graham stood, moving back toward the fireplace. You hungry? Got some stew here. Not fancy, but it is hot and filling. Natalie realized she was starving. She could not remember the last time she had eaten. Yes, please. As Graham ladled stew into a bowl, Natalie looked around the cabin more carefully. It was small but well maintained, everything neat and organized. A single room with the bed in one corner, a table and chairs near the fireplace, shelves holding supplies and books. Books. That surprised her. Many men on the frontier had little use for reading. Graham brought her the bowl and a spoon, then pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat with his own meal. They ate in silence for a few minutes, Natalie savoring the warmth and substance of the food. The stew was simple, just beef and vegetables, but it tasted like heaven. What happened out there? Graham asked finally. If you feel up to talking about it. Natalie set down her spoon, her appetite fading as the memories rushed back. There were 5 wagons in our party. We left Independence Rock 3 days ago, heading for Wheatland. This morning, just after dawn, they came out of nowhere. 8 or 9 men, maybe more. They were shooting before we even knew what was happening. My father pushed me out the back of the wagon, told me to run. I heard him fire his rifle, heard him fall. I just ran. The Cassidy gang, Graham said, his voice hard. They have been terrorizing this stretch of Wyoming for months. Law cannot seem to catch them. They hit wagon trains, stage coaches, small ranches, take everything and leave no witnesses. He looked at her intently. You are lucky to be alive. I do not feel lucky. The words came out more bitter than Natalie intended. Graham's expression softened. No, I suppose you would not, but you are alive and that matters. Your father's last act was to save you. Honor that by surviving. It was almost exactly what Natalie had been telling herself as she crawled through the mud. Somehow, hearing it from someone else made it feel more real, more possible. She nodded slowly. What do I do now? I have nothing. No money, no family, nowhere to go. First, you recover. You have been through hell, pardon my language. Your body needs rest and your mind needs time to process what happened. Graham stood, collecting their empty bowls. After that, we will figure something out. Wheatland is a growing town. There is work for those willing to do it. Mrs. Henderson might know of families needing help. Or there is the hotel, the general store, the restaurant, lots of possibilities. You have already done so much, Natalie said. I cannot ask you to do more. You are not asking, I am offering. Graham's tone left no room for argument. Now get some rest. I will be just outside if you need anything. Outside? Natalie looked toward the window where darkness had fallen. Where will you sleep? Got a bedroll in the lean-to. I have slept in worse places. He was already moving toward the door, clearly considering the matter settled. Wait. Natalie's voice stopped him. I did not even tell you my name. I am Natalie. Natalie Warren. Graham turned back, and for the first time she saw him smile. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges and reaching all the way to his eyes. Good to properly meet you, Natalie Warren, though I wish it had been under better circumstances. So do I, Natalie said softly. So do I. The next morning brought sunshine, as though the world was determined to mock the tragedy of the day before. Natalie woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, her body stiff and sore but her mind clearer than it had been. She found the clothes Graham had mentioned folded neatly on the chair. A simple calico dress, a bit worn but clean and well mended, along with undergarments and stockings. Whoever Mrs. Henderson's daughter was, she was close to Natalie's size. Natalie dressed slowly, her muscles protesting every movement. When she emerged from behind the screen that offered a modicum of privacy, she found Graham at the stove, tending a skillet of bacon and eggs. He glanced up at her approach. Morning. How are you feeling? Like I was trampled by a herd of cattle, Natalie admitted, but better than yesterday. That is something. Graham gestured to the table. Sit. Breakfast is almost ready. Natalie sat, watching him work. He moved with the easy efficiency of someone who had been taking care of himself for a long time. Do you live here alone? She asked. I do. Built this cabin 3 years ago when I decided to settle in this area rather than keep drifting with the cattle drives. Still hire on for the drives a few times a year, but mostly I work my own small herd now. Got about 100 head on land I am leasing from the Hendersons. He brought plates to the table, setting one in front of her. What about you? What were you and your father planning in Wheatland? Natalie picked up her fork. My father was a farmer in Iowa. After my mother died 5 years ago, he struggled to keep up with the work. We lost the farm 2 years ago to debt. We have been drifting since then, my father picking up odd jobs where he could. He heard there was steady work in Wheatland, maybe a chance to save up and start over. I was going to find work too. I can cook clean, so I am good with numbers and can read and write well. My mother made sure of that. That is more education than most have out here, Graham said. The school teacher in Wheatland is getting on in years. I heard her say she would love to have help, maybe someone to take over when she retires. With your reading and writing skills, that could be a possibility. The idea sent a flutter through Natalie's chest. Teaching. She had loved learning, had sometimes helped the younger children at the one-room schoolhouse back in Iowa. Could she really do something like that? I would like that, if it is possible. They ate in companionable silence for a while. Natalie found herself sneaking glances at Graham, trying to figure him out. He was unlike any man she had met before. There was a quietness to him, a calm strength that made her feel safe despite everything that had happened. He had saved her life without hesitation, had given up his own bed and comfort to help a complete stranger, and was now talking about her future as though it mattered to him. Why did you help me? The question slipped out before Natalie could stop it. I mean, I am grateful. More grateful than I can say. But you did not know me. You risked yourself going back to bury the dead. You brought me here, gave me food and shelter. Why? Graham set down his fork, considering the question seriously. My father used to say that a man's worth is not measured by what he takes from the world, but by what he gives to it. When I was 17, my family was traveling west to Oregon. We got caught in a blizzard in the mountains. We would have died if not for a trapper who found us and led us to shelter. He saved all our lives. I have never forgotten that. His gray eyes met hers steadily. So when I saw you crawling through that mud, there was no question of whether to help. There was only how fast I could reach you. Something warm bloomed in Natalie's chest, chasing away a bit of the cold grief that had settled there. Your father sounds like he was a good man. He was. He and my mother both passed from fever the winter after we reached Oregon. I was 18, my sister just 16. We stayed long enough to bury them and sell the land, then headed back east. She met a man in Kansas, married him. They have got a farm there now, 3 kids. I visit when I can, but I was always more suited to moving around, until I came here and found I wanted to stay. What made you want to stay? Graham looked around the cabin, a thoughtful expression on his face. The land, maybe. The mountains in the distance, the big sky, the way the wind sounds through the grass. Or maybe I was just tired of running from the grief. Figured it was time to build something instead of always leaving things behind. Natalie understood that impulse more than he could know. She had been running too, in a way, ever since her mother died. Never settling, never putting down roots, always moving to the next place and the next. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe Wheatland could be the place where she finally built something of her own. When can we go into town? She asked. I need to start figuring out how to move forward. Today, if you feel up to it, it is about a 2-hour ride. I need to pick up some supplies anyway, and I want to report the attack to the sheriff. Not that it will do much good, but it should be reported. Natalie nodded. I want to go, I need to. Sitting here doing nothing will drive me mad. Graham's expression showed approval. Then we will go. But if you get tired or need to rest, you tell me. No trying to be tough when you do not have to be. I will tell you, Natalie promised. An hour later, they were on their way to Wheatland. Graham had offered Natalie his horse, but she insisted she could ride double with him, not wanting to slow them down. So she sat behind him on the big roan gelding, her arms wrapped around his waist, trying not to think about how improper this was or how solid and warm he felt against her. The Wyoming landscape spread out around them in all directions, vast and beautiful and more than a little intimidating. Rolling grassland stretched to distant mountains, broken here and there by rocky outcroppings and stands of cottonwood trees along creek beds. The sky seemed impossibly large, a dome of blue unmarred by clouds. It was beautiful, Natalie had to admit, even if the emptiness of it all made her feel very small and alone. You ever been this far west before? Graham asked over his shoulder. No. Iowa was the farthest west we had lived until we started traveling. We went through Nebraska, saw some incredible sights, but this is different. Everything is so open. Takes some getting used to, Graham agreed. When I first came to Wyoming, the emptiness bothered me. Felt exposed, like there was nowhere to hide. But after a while, I started to see it differently. All this space, it is freedom. Room to breathe, to grow, to become whoever you want to be. Not like the crowded cities back east where everyone knows your business and holds you to expectations you never asked for. Natalie had never been to a big city, but she understood what he meant about expectations. In their small Iowa town, she had been defined by her family, by her father's debts, by her mother's death. Here in this vast empty land, she could be whoever she chose to become. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the steady rhythm of the horse's gait lulling Natalie into a meditative state. Despite everything that had happened, despite the grief that sat like a stone in her chest, she felt a strange sense of peace. Maybe it was the land. Maybe it was the man she was riding with. Maybe it was simply relief at being alive. Whatever it was, she was grateful for it. Wheatland appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a cluster of buildings rising from the grassland. As they drew closer, Natalie could make out the details. A main street lined with wooden buildings, some painted, some bare wood-weathered gray by wind and sun. There was a general store, a hotel, a saloon, a church with a white steeple, a blacksmith, and various other establishments that indicated a thriving frontier town. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, going about their business. Natalie saw women in calico and gingham dresses, men in work clothes and cowboy gear, a few children playing in the street. It looked like a normal day in a normal town, and the ordinariness of it made Natalie's throat tight. Yesterday, while she was crawling through mud for her life, these people were going about their daily routines, unaware that her world was ending. Life went on. It always did. Graham guided his horse to the hitching rail in front of a building with a sign that reads Sheriff's Office. He dismounted, then reached up to help Natalie down. His hands on her waist were strong and steady, and for a moment after her feet touched the ground, they stood close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "You doing all right?" he asked quietly. Natalie nodded, not trusting her voice. She was not all right, not really, but she was standing. That would have to be enough. The sheriff was a grizzled man in his 50s, with a star pinned to his vest, and a world-weary expression that suggested he had seen too much in his years of law enforcement. He listened to Graham's account of finding Natalie and discovering the massacre, his face growing grimmer with each detail. "Damn Cassidy gang," he muttered when Graham finished. "Pardon my language, miss. They have been a plague on this territory for too long. Problem is, they are smart. They hit fast, hit hard, and then disappear like smoke. By the time I get word of an attack and ride out there, they are long gone, and there is never any trail to follow." "There has to be something you can do," Natalie said, surprised by the anger in her own voice. "They murdered my father. They murdered good people who were just trying to make a better life." The sheriff's expression softened with sympathy. "I know, miss, and I am truly sorry for your loss. I have got word out to every town between here and the Montana border. The territorial marshal knows about them. We are doing everything we can. But this is a big territory with a lot of empty land, plenty of places for outlaws to hide." It was not enough, but Natalie could see it was all the law had to offer. She turned away, swallowing down her frustration and grief. Graham's hand touched her shoulder gently. "Come on. Let me introduce you to some folks who might be able to help in more practical ways." They left the sheriff's office and walked down the main street. People nodded to Graham as they passed, some calling out greetings. He was clearly well known and respected in the town. He returned the greetings but did not stop until they reached a white clapboard building set back from the street, surrounded by a small fenced yard. A sign hung near the gate, "Wheatland School. Miss Judith Winters, teacher." Graham pushed open the gate and led Natalie up the path to the door. He knocked, and a moment later, it opened to reveal a woman in her late 60s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Graham Lawson," she said, her voice carrying the crisp tones of an educated Easterner. "What brings you here on a weekday morning? Should you not be out with your cattle, morning, Miss Judith? I have someone I would like you to meet." Graham stepped aside, gesturing for Natalie to come forward. "This is Natalie Warren. She and her father were part of the wagon train that was attacked by the Cassidy gang yesterday. Her father was killed. I was hoping you might have some advice about work opportunities for her in town." Miss Judith's sharp gaze softened immediately, and she reached out to take Natalie's hand in both of hers. "My dear girl, I am so terribly sorry. What a horrible tragedy. Please come in, both of you." The interior of the schoolhouse was neat and orderly, with rows of desks facing a large blackboard. Books lined shelves along one wall, and maps and educational posters decorated the others. It smelled of chalk and ink and paper, familiar scents that made Natalie's heart ache with memory. Miss Judith gestured them to seats at the front row desks, then pulled up a chair to face them. "Now, tell me about yourself, Natalie. What skills do you have?" Natalie listed her abilities, the same ones she had told Graham that morning. As she spoke, she saw Miss Judith's interest growing. "Can you read aloud for me?" Miss Judith asked, reaching for a book from her desk. Natalie took the offered book and began to read. It was a passage from a novel, and she read clearly and with expression the way her mother had taught her. When she finished, Miss Judith was smiling. "Excellent. Your pronunciation is clear, your pace is good, and you have a natural sense of how to bring words to life. Can you work with numbers?" Natalie nodded. "Yes, madam. I used to help my father with accounts." "Perfect." Miss Judith sat back, her expression thoughtful. "I have been teaching at this school for 15 years, ever since I came west after my husband died. I am tired, if I am being honest. My health is not what it once was, and I have been thinking about retiring. The town has been looking for someone to assist me and eventually take over. The pay is modest but steady, and the position comes with a small house that the town owns. It is not much, but it is clean and solid. Would you be interested?" Natalie's heart leaped. It was more than she had dared to hope for. "Yes, absolutely, I would be honored." "Excellent. You can start tomorrow if you like. Come observe how I run things, help where you can, and we will see how you do. If it works out, we can make it official with the town council." Tears pricked Natalie's eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Miss Judith. You have no idea what this means to me." "I think I have some idea," Miss Judith said gently. "We all need a purpose, especially after loss. This will give you one, and it will help our children. That is what I call a good bargain." When they left the schoolhouse, Natalie felt lighter than she had since before the attack. She had work, or at least the prospect of it. She had a purpose. She had a reason to keep going. "That went well," Graham said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Better than well." "It went perfectly." Natalie turned to look at him, this man who had saved her life and was now helping her rebuild it. "Thank you, Graham, for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not need to repay me." Graham's expression was serious. "Just promise me you will let yourself heal. Grief does not have a schedule, and starting over is hard. But you are strong, Natalie. I could see that when I found you yesterday. You were crawling through mud, exhausted and terrified, but you were not giving up. That is strength." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that went deeper than mere gratitude. Natalie found herself looking into Graham's eyes and seeing understanding there and kindness, and something else that made her breath catch. Then the moment passed, and Graham was gesturing down the street. "Come on. Let me show you the rest of the town. You should know where everything is if you are going to be living here." They spent the next hour walking through Wheatland. Graham introduced her to Mrs. Miller at the general store, a plump, cheerful woman who promised to extend credit until Natalie received her first pay. They met Dr. Carson, an elderly physician who had been practicing medicine on the frontier for 40 years. They visited the church, where Reverend Thomas welcomed her warmly and invited her to Sunday services. By the time they finished, Natalie's head was spinning with names and faces, but she felt welcomed in a way she had not expected. Their last stop was a small house at the edge of town, set back from the street with a patch of ground that might once have been a garden. It was painted white, though the paint was peeling in places, and it had a covered porch and shuttered windows. "This is the teacher's house," Graham said. "Miss Judith has been living with her sister above the general store for the past year because the walk from here was getting too hard for her. But the town kept the house maintained for whoever would be the next teacher." Natalie walked up to the porch, imagining herself living here. It was small, probably just a couple of rooms, but it was a house, a place that would be hers. She had not had a real home since leaving Iowa. "It is perfect," she said softly. "It needs some work," Graham said, coming up beside her. "Fence needs mending, porch could use some boards replaced, garden needs clearing, but the structure is sound." "Could you help me fix it up?" Natalie asked, then immediately felt foolish. "I am sorry. You have already done so much. I should not keep asking. I offered to show you around town." "I am offering to help with the house too." Graham's tone was firm. "I am good with my hands and I have got time between now and the next cattle drive. Besides, I would like to." "Why?" Natalie asked, echoing her question from that morning. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Graham looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. "Honestly, I do not fully know. When I pulled you out of that mud, something changed. Maybe it was seeing how hard you were fighting to survive. Maybe it was the way you did not fall apart when I told you about your father, even though I could see your heart breaking. Or maybe it is simpler than that. Maybe I just like you, Natalie Warren, and I want to help you build a new life here." Natalie's breath caught. There was something in his voice, in the way he looked at her, that made her pulse quicken. She barely knew this man. She had met him less than 24 hours ago in the worst moment of her life. It was too soon to be feeling anything beyond gratitude. But there was no denying the warmth that spread through her chest when he smiled at her, or the way her heart beat faster when he was near. "I would like your help," she said quietly. "And I like you too, Graham Lawson. You are a good man." His smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Then it is settled. We will get this house fixed up, and you will start your new life in Wheatland." Over the next 2 weeks, Natalie fell into a routine that began to feel almost normal. She spent her days at the schoolhouse, learning from Miss Judith and working with the children. There were 23 students ranging from 6 to 14 years old, and Natalie loved every chaotic, exhausting minute of teaching them. She discovered she had a knack for explaining difficult concepts in ways that made sense to young minds, and the children responded to her warmth and patience. In the evenings and on weekends, Graham came to help work on the teacher's house. True to his word, he was skilled with his hands. He replaced rotted boards on the porch, fixed the fence, repaired the shutters, and even helped Natalie clean out the interior and give it a fresh coat of whitewash. As they worked side by side, they talked about everything and nothing. Graham told her about his travels, the places he had been, the things he had seen. Natalie shared memories of her childhood in Iowa, stories about her mother, carefully edited tales about the difficult years after they lost the farm. The more time they spent together, the more Natalie felt herself drawn to Graham. It was more than gratitude, though that was certainly part of it. She admired his quiet strength, his steady dependability, the way he approached problems with calm logic. She liked his dry sense of humor, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the rare laugh that seemed to surprise even him when it burst out. She liked the way he listened when she talked, really listened, as though her words mattered. And she could not deny the physical awareness that sparked through her whenever he was near, the way her skin tingled when his hand accidentally brushed hers, the heat that pooled in her stomach when she caught him looking at her. It was terrifying. Her father had been dead only weeks. She should be drowning in grief, not feeling this pull toward another person. But grief and attraction were not mutually exclusive. She was learning. She mourned her father every day, cried herself to sleep some nights, felt the hollow ache of his absence like a physical wound. But she was also still alive, still a woman with a woman's feelings and desires. Graham had saved her life, and now he was helping her build a new one. Was it so wrong to want him to be part of that new life? She thought he might feel the same way. There were moments when she would look up from scrubbing a floor or hanging curtains to find him watching her with an expression that made her heart race. Times when his hand would linger on hers a beat too long when he helped her down from a ladder. Moments of charged silence when they stood close together, and Natalie could swear the air itself hummed with possibility. But Graham never crossed that invisible line between friendship and something more. He was always respectful, always proper, and Natalie did not know if she was relieved or disappointed. 3 weeks after the attack, Miss Judith officially presented Natalie to the town council as her chosen successor. The council approved unanimously, and Natalie moved into the teacher's house that same day. It felt surreal to have her own place again, humble though it was. Graham had brought furniture from his cabin and from families in town who had extra. A bed, a table and chairs, a rocking chair, a dresser, even some dishes and cooking utensils. Mrs. Henderson had donated curtains and linens. The house was small and simple, but it was clean and comfortable and hers. That first night in her new home, Natalie stood on the porch and looked out at the town of Wheatland spread out before her, lights flickering in windows as families settled in for the evening. She felt her father's absence like a physical pain, wished desperately that he could see this, that he could know his sacrifice had not been in vain. She had survived. She had found a place to belong. She was going to be all right. Your father would be proud of you. Natalie turned to find Graham standing at the bottom of the porch steps. She had not heard him approach, but she was not surprised to see him. He seemed to have an instinct for when she needed him. "I hope so," she said softly. "I wish he was here to see it." Graham climbed the steps and stood beside her, both of them looking out at the town. "Tell me about him. What was he like?" Natalie smiled through the tears that threatened. "He was gentle. That is what I remember most. He had big, rough farmer's hands, but he was always so gentle. He used to sing to my mother when she was sick, these old songs from his childhood in Pennsylvania. After she died, I never heard him sing again. I think her death broke something in him that never healed, but he tried so hard to take care of me, to give me a good life. When we lost the farm, he was so ashamed, even though it was not his fault. The debt, the bad harvests, none of it was his fault, but he felt like he had failed us." "He did not fail," Graham said firmly. "He protected you when it mattered most. He gave his life so you could escape. That is not failure, that is love." Natalie turned to look at Graham, this man who had become so important to her in such a short time. "You barely knew me when you saved me. Why did you risk so much? I told you before. I could not leave you there. But it is more than that, is it not?" Natalie took a step closer to him, her heart pounding. "You have been helping me for weeks now, coming to town almost every day, spending your time fixing up this house." "Graham, why?" In the twilight, Graham's eyes looked almost black. He was silent for a long moment, and Natalie thought he might deflect the question again. Then he reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Because from the moment I lifted you out of that mud, I have not been able to stop thinking about you," he said quietly. "Because I admire your strength and your courage. Because I like the sound of your laugh and the way you talk to the children at school. Because when I am with you, I feel more alive than I have in years." He paused, his hand falling away. "But I know it is too soon. You are still grieving. You need time to heal, to build your life here. I should not be telling you any of this." "What if I want you to?" Natalie whispered. Her hand came up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid beat of his heart beneath her palm. "What if I have been thinking about you too? What if when I am with you, I feel safe and happy and like maybe everything is going to be all right after all? Natalie." Her name was a prayer and a question all at once. "I know it is fast," Natalie said. "I know I should probably take time, be sensible. But Graham, you saved my life. You have been saving me ever since in 100 small ways, and somewhere along the way I started falling for you. If that is too much, if you do not want that, please tell me now." Instead of answering with words, Graham cupped her face in both hands and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost hesitant, giving her every chance to pull away. But Natalie had no intention of pulling away. She melted into him, her arms sliding around his neck, kissing him back with all the emotion that had been building inside her for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Graham rested his forehead against hers. "I want this," he said. "I want you, but I need you to be sure. I need you to know that this is not just gratitude or relief or reaction to trauma. I need you to want me for me, not because I was the one who happened to save you." Natalie pulled back far enough to look him in the eyes. "Graham Lawson, you are the kindest, most decent man I have ever met. You are strong and capable and smart. You make me laugh. You make me feel safe. You look at me like I matter, like my thoughts and feelings are important. I fell for you because of who you are, not because of what you did. Though I admit, pulling me out of the mud and carrying me to safety is one of the most romantic things anyone has ever done for me." Graham laughed, that rare, full laugh that transformed his face. "Most romantic, huh? I will have to remember that mud is the key to a woman's heart." Natalie swatted his chest playfully. "You know what I mean." "I do." Graham's expression grew serious again. "I am going to court you properly, Natalie Warren, with flowers and picnics and long walks and all the things a woman deserves. This is not going to be some rushed frontier marriage of convenience. I am going to win your heart the right way." "You have already won it," Natalie said softly, "but I would not say no to flowers and picnics." They stood there on the porch for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars come out over Wheatland. For the first time since the attack, Natalie felt truly at peace. The grief was still there, and she knew it always would be, but it was no longer the only thing she felt. There was also hope and joy, and the delicious anticipation of what the future might hold. Over the next few months, Graham made good on his promise to court Natalie properly. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, their bright colors bringing life to her small house. He took her on picnics to beautiful spots he knew around the territory, spreading blankets beside clear streams, or on hilltops with views that seemed to stretch forever. They attended church socials together, dances at the town hall, even a traveling theater troupe's performance of Shakespeare that left them both laughing at the melodrama. Through it all, Natalie continued to settle into her life in Wheatland. Teaching became not just a job but a passion. She loved watching the children learn, seeing their faces light up when they mastered a difficult concept or discovered the joy of a good book. Miss Judith reduced her hours gradually, letting Natalie take on more and more responsibility, and by early autumn, Natalie was running the school almost entirely on her own. She also became part of the community in ways that went beyond teaching. She joined the Church Ladies' Aid Society, helped organize fundraisers for various causes, and became friends with several of the other young women in town. But it was Graham who remained at the center of her world, the person she most wanted to see at the end of each day, the one whose opinion mattered most. In October, Graham asked Natalie to come see his cabin and his land. She borrowed a horse from the livery, and rode out on a crisp autumn morning when the leaves of the cottonwood trees glowed gold in the sunshine. The ride took just over an hour, and when she arrived, she found Graham waiting for her at the fence line of his property. His cabin was set in a beautiful location, nestled in a valley with a creek running nearby and the Laramie Mountains rising blue and purple in the distance. His small herd of cattle grazed peacefully across the rolling grassland. It was simple but lovely, and Natalie could see the pride in Graham's face as he showed her around. "This is about 200 acres," he explained as they walked. "I am leasing it from the Hendersons with an option to buy. If I can build up my herd enough, save enough money, I will purchase it outright in the next few years." "It is beautiful," Natalie said sincerely. "You must love it here." "I do, but it has been lonely." Graham stopped walking and turned to face her. "Natalie, I have been alone a long time by choice. After my parents died and my sister got married, I told myself I was fine on my own. I did not need anyone. But then I found you and everything changed. You make me want things I never let myself want before: a partner, a family, a shared life." Natalie's heart was racing. "Graham, what are you saying?" He took her hands in his. "I am saying that I love you. I have loved you for months now, probably since the first time I heard you laugh. I know we have not been courting very long by traditional standards, but out here, time moves differently. When you know, you know. And I know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Tears spilled down Natalie's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too, so much." "Then marry me," Graham said. "Be my wife, help me build a life here. Teach during the school year if you want, or help me with the ranch full-time, or both. We will figure it out together, just say yes." "Yes," Natalie whispered, then louder, laughing through her tears. "Yes, Graham. Yes, I will marry you." Graham swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, pouring all his love and hope into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Natalie felt like her heart might burst with happiness. "When?" she asked. "When should we get married?" "As soon as possible," Graham said. "I have waited long enough for you." They were married 3 weeks later in the Wheatland church, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Natalie wore a dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make, simple but elegant in cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Graham wore his best suit, looking almost uncomfortable in the formal clothes but devastatingly handsome nonetheless. Miss Judith cried through the entire ceremony. Mrs. Miller from the general store dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Even the sheriff looked a bit misty. The whole town had watched Natalie arrive as a traumatized refugee and transform into a confident, beloved member of the community, and they were all invested in her happiness. Reverend Thomas pronounced them man and wife, and when Graham kissed her, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception afterward in the church hall was a boisterous affair with food, music, and dancing. Natalie danced with Graham, with Dr. Carson, with the sheriff, with practically every man in town. Her face hurt from smiling, but she could not stop. As the evening wore on, and they prepared to leave for Graham's cabin, now their cabin, Natalie took a moment to step outside and look up at the stars. It was almost exactly 6 months since the attack that had changed her life forever. 6 months since she had crawled through mud, certain she was going to die. 6 months since Graham had lifted her up and carried her to safety. "What are you thinking about?" Graham came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Everything," Natalie said softly. "How much has changed? How different my life is now compared to what I thought it would be." She turned in his arms to face him. "I wish my father could be here to see this, to know that I found happiness, that his sacrifice was not in vain." "I think he knows," Graham said gently. "And I think he would approve. I promise you, Natalie, I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I will build a life with you that honors his memory and his love." "I know you will," Natalie said, reaching up to kiss him. "You already have." They rode back to the cabin under a canopy of stars. Natalie seated in front of Graham on his horse, wrapped in his coat against the autumn chill. When they arrived, Graham insisted on carrying her over the threshold, both of them laughing as he maneuvered through the doorway without bumping her head. Inside, the cabin glowed with lamplight and warmth from the fire Graham had built before they left that morning. He had done his best to make the space welcoming, but it was clearly a bachelor's domain. Over the coming weeks and months, Natalie would add her touches. Curtains at the windows, colorful quilts on the bed, books on the shelves, wildflowers in jars on the table. She would make it a home. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight was about the two of them, about the promises they had made and the life they were beginning together. Graham set Natalie on her feet and cupped her face in his hands, looking at her with such love that it took her breath away. "I love you, Mrs. Lawson," he said softly. "I love you too, Mr. Lawson," Natalie replied. "Now stop talking and kiss your wife." He did, and they lost themselves in each other, in touch and taste and the overwhelming rightness of being together. This was where she belonged, Natalie thought as Graham lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bed. Not in Iowa, not on the road, but here, in Wyoming, in this cabin with this man. She had been forged in fire and mud, had lost everything and found something better. This was her home now. Graham was her home. The first year of marriage brought its share of adjustments and challenges. Natalie continued teaching through the winter and spring, riding into Wheatland 3 days a week while Graham tended the ranch. On her days off and during the summer, she helped Graham with the cattle and the land. It was hard work, harder than anything she had done before, but she loved it. There was something deeply satisfying about working the land, about seeing tangible results from her efforts. They also faced the harsh reality of frontier life. A blizzard in January killed several of Graham's cattle, a significant financial loss that set back their plans to purchase the land. In March, one of Natalie's students died from pneumonia, breaking her heart and reminding her of how fragile life was on the frontier. In June, there was a prairie fire that threatened the ranch, and Natalie worked alongside Graham and neighboring ranchers for hours fighting the flames, coming away exhausted and covered in soot, but grateful that the cabin and most of the herd had been saved. Through it all, their love deepened and strengthened. Natalie learned that Graham could be stubborn and brooding when worried about money or the ranch. Graham learned that Natalie had a fierce temper when pushed too far and a tendency to take on too much responsibility. They had their first real fight about whether Natalie should continue teaching while pregnant. Graham worried about the strain on her health. Natalie insistent that she was perfectly capable of making her own decisions about her body. The pregnancy had been confirmed by Dr. Carson in late summer of their first year of marriage. Natalie had suspected for a few weeks, but hearing it officially made it real in a way that left her giddy with joy and terror in equal measure. Graham had picked her up and spun her around right there in Dr. Carson's office, whooping with delight. They had a baby boy in March of 1887, born in their cabin with Mrs. Henderson acting as midwife. It was a long, difficult labor that left Graham white-faced and terrified, pacing outside while Mrs. Henderson and Dr. Carson tended to Natalie. But when it was over and he held his son for the first time, tears streamed down his face. "What should we name him?" Natalie asked, exhausted but radiant as she watched her husband cradle their newborn son. "What was your father's name?" Graham asked softly. "Thomas. Thomas Warren." "Then let us call him Thomas, after the man who saved your life so you could give me mine." So Thomas Graham Lawson entered the world, and their family was complete, or so they thought. 2 years later came a daughter, Anna, named for Natalie's mother, then another son, James, 2 years after that. Their cabin grew crowded, but it was filled with love and laughter and the chaos that comes with small children. Natalie eventually stopped teaching full-time, though she continued to help out at the school when needed. Miss Judith had retired completely, moving to live with her sister in Cheyenne, and the town had hired a new permanent teacher. Natalie found she did not miss it as much as she thought she would. Teaching her own children, watching them grow and learn, was its own kind of fulfillment. Graham's ranch prospered over the years. Slowly but surely, they saved enough money to purchase the land outright from the Hendersons. They expanded the herd, built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, added a barn and outbuildings. It was not an easy life, and there were lean years along with the prosperous ones, but they were building something together, creating a legacy for their children. The town of Wheatland grew too. The railroad came through in 1888, bringing new opportunities and new people. What had been a small frontier town when Natalie first arrived gradually transformed into a thriving community. New businesses opened, more families settled in the area, schools and churches multiplied. Natalie watched it all with a sense of pride and ownership. This was her town, her home, and she had been part of building it. The Cassidy gang that had killed her father was finally brought to justice in 1889. The territorial marshal tracked them down after they made the mistake of robbing a bank in Cheyenne. There was a shootout, and 3 of the gang members were killed, including the leader. The rest were captured and hanged after a quick trial. When Graham brought Natalie the news, she felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, satisfaction, but also a hollow sense that justice, however served, could not bring back the dead. "I wish my father could know they were caught," she said quietly. "Maybe he does," Graham said, pulling her close. "And maybe he is at peace knowing you are happy and safe." Natalie chose to believe that. She had long since made peace with her father's death, had integrated that grief into the fabric of her life rather than letting it consume her. She thought of him often, especially when teaching Thomas to read or watching Anna help in the garden. She told her children stories about their grandfather, keeping his memory alive for the next generation. Years passed in the way they do, full of small joys and everyday struggles. There were more children. Another daughter, Elizabeth, born in 1893 and finally a late surprise. Another son they named Matthew, born in 1897 when Natalie was 42 years old. By then, Thomas was preparing to leave for agricultural college, and Anna was courting the son of a neighboring rancher. The house was in a constant state of organized chaos, and Natalie loved every minute of it. Graham aged well, his dark hair going silver at the temples, his face gaining character lines from years of working in the sun and wind. But he was still strong, still capable, still the steady presence Natalie had fallen in love with. And he still looked at her sometimes with that same wonder he had shown when he pulled her from the mud so many years ago, as though he could not quite believe she was real. Natalie's own hair showed strands of gray, and her body bore the marks of bearing and raising 5 children. But she felt more beautiful now than she had at 22. She was confident in ways her younger self never was, comfortable in her own skin, secure in the love of her family. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Graham took Natalie on a trip, just the 2 of them, leaving the children in the care of Anna and her new husband. They rode out to the spot where Graham's cabin had first stood, though they had long since built a much larger house on another part of their property. The old cabin was used for storage now, but it still stood solid. "This is where our life together really began," Graham said as they stood looking at the weathered structure. "No," Natalie corrected gently. "It began on a muddy road when you refused to leave me there. Everything since then has just been building on that foundation." Graham turned to her, taking both her hands. "Do you have any regrets? It has been a hard life sometimes. The frontier is not easy. I sometimes wonder if you would have been happier somewhere more settled with more comforts and culture." Natalie laughed. "Graham Lawson, in 20 years of marriage you should know me better than that. I would not trade this life for anything. The hardships, the struggles, the joys, the triumphs, all of it. This is exactly where I am supposed to be, with you." He kissed her then, and it was as sweet and thrilling as their first kiss on the porch of the teacher's house all those years ago. Some things, Natalie reflected, only got better with time. As they rode back to their ranch, Natalie looked out across the land they had worked so hard to build. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. In the distance, she could see their house, smoke rising from the chimney, lights beginning to glow in the windows as evening came on. Their children were there, waiting for them. Their life was there. She thought back to that terrified young woman crawling through the mud, certain her life was over. If she could go back and tell that woman what the future held, she would hardly believe it. From the depths of despair and loss, Natalie had found love, family, purpose, and home. She had built a life that mattered, raised children who would carry on, created something lasting and good. "What are you thinking about?" Graham asked, as he so often did. "Everything," Natalie said, the same answer she had given on their wedding night. "How lucky I am, how blessed, how grateful." "The luck was mine," Graham said. "I was just riding my usual route that day. If I had left an hour earlier or later, I would have missed you completely." "But you did not," Natalie pointed out. "You were exactly where you were supposed to be, exactly when you were supposed to be there." Some people would call that fate. Some people would be right. They rode home together as twilight deepened into night, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a love that would last a lifetime. Behind them, the past with all its pain and loss. Ahead, a future full of promise. And in the present, the simple joy of riding side by side together home. The years continued to unfold with their mix of joy and sorrow, triumph and hardship. Thomas graduated from agricultural college and returned to help run the ranch, bringing with him new ideas and modern methods that increased their productivity. Anna gave birth to 3 children in quick succession, making Natalie and Graham grandparents and adding a new dimension to their happiness. James showed a gift for working with horses and began training them for sale, adding another income stream to the ranch. Elizabeth became a teacher like her mother, taking over at the Wheatland School when the previous teacher retired. And young Matthew, the surprise baby, grew into a bright, curious boy who always had his nose in a book. The turn of the century brought changes to Wyoming and the nation. The frontier was officially closed, the wild days giving way to more settled times. Automobiles began appearing in Wheatland, strange contraptions that spooked the horses. Telephones connected distant places. The world was becoming smaller, more interconnected. But on the Lawson Ranch, some things remained constant. The work of raising cattle, the rhythm of the seasons, the importance of family and community. Graham and Natalie watched the world change from their little corner of Wyoming, adapting where necessary but holding firm to the values that had served them well. In 1906, on a crisp autumn day much like the one when Graham had first shown Natalie his land, they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party at the ranch, inviting what seemed like half of Wheatland and the surrounding area. There was food and music and dancing, and speeches that made Natalie cry with laughter and sentiment. When it was Graham's turn to speak, he stood and pulled Natalie up beside him, wrapping an arm around her waist. 25 years ago, he began, I asked this woman to marry me. I told her I wanted to build a life together. I had no idea then just how rich that life would be. Natalie, you have given me 5 incredible children, a home filled with love, and a partnership that makes every day better. You are the bravest, strongest, most loving person I know. I am grateful every single day that I happened to be riding that road when you needed help. I love you more now than I did 25 years ago, and I will love you more 25 years from now. Natalie was crying openly by the time he finished. I love you too, she managed to say. You saved my life in more ways than one. You gave me a reason to keep going, a purpose, a family, a home. Everything good in my life started the day you refused to let me crawl another inch through that mud. Thank you for carrying me then, and for walking beside me ever since. The party continued late into the night, but eventually, people began to drift home. When the last guest had departed and their children had finally gone to bed, Graham and Natalie sat together on the porch of their house, wrapped in a blanket against the autumn chill, looking up at the stars. Do you remember our first night in the old cabin? Graham asked. You asked me what I was thinking, and I said I was thinking about everything. I remember, Natalie said. I said the same thing on our wedding night. What are you thinking now? Natalie considered the question seriously. I am thinking about that woman crawling through the mud, and how she would never have believed this could be her future. I am thinking about my father and how I wish he could have known you, could have seen his grandchildren. I am thinking about how grateful I am for every moment, good and bad, that brought me to exactly this place this time with you. Graham pulled her closer. That woman in the mud had incredible strength. She survived what would have broken many people. She rebuilt her life from nothing. She became an amazing mother, a gifted teacher, a true partner. I am in awe of her. I am in awe of you. I could not have done any of it without you, Natalie said. We did it together. That is what makes it so special. They sat in comfortable silence for a long time, watching the stars wheel slowly across the sky. A coyote called somewhere in the distance, and their old dog raised his head briefly before settling back down with a contented sigh. The night was peaceful, perfect in its simplicity. Graham. Natalie said eventually, Yes, thank you for stopping. That day on the road when you saw me crawling through the mud, thank you for stopping. Graham turned to look at her, his gray eyes reflecting the starlight. Natalie, stopping for you was the best decision I ever made. It was not just saving your life. It was saving mine too. You gave me purpose, family, love. You turned my house into a home and my solitary existence into a life worth living. So thank you for letting me stop. Thank you for letting me carry you. And thank you for choosing to walk beside me ever since. Natalie reached up and kissed him, pouring 25 years of love and devotion into the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Come on, Graham said, standing and pulling her to her feet. Let us go to bed. We have got grandchildren coming to visit tomorrow, and you know they will be here at dawn. Natalie laughed. They are their grandfather's grandchildren, always up with the sun. They went inside, the dog trailing behind them. Graham banked the fire while Natalie blew out the lamps. They made their way to their bedroom, the same room they had shared for more than 20 years, and prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of long marriage. As Natalie lay in the darkness, Graham's arm around her, his steady breathing beginning to slow toward sleep, she felt profoundly at peace. Her life had not been easy, but it had been good. She had known great loss and great love. She had raised children and built a home. She had made a difference in her community. She had loved and been loved in return. The road that had led her here had been long and difficult, beginning with tragedy and fear and pain. But it had brought her to this moment, this place, this man. And she would not change a single step of the journey because every step had been necessary to bring her home. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Graham murmured back, already half asleep. "Always have. Always will." Natalie smiled and let her eyes drift closed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys as every day did. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of the man who had saved her life and then built a new one with her. The cowboy who had seen her at her lowest moment and had refused to let her give up. The love of her life. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the promise of another day, another season, another year. The ranch slept peacefully beneath the stars, a testament to everything Graham and Natalie had built together. And in the morning, the sun would rise on another day in the life they had created, full of work and love and family. It was a good life, Natalie thought as sleep claimed her. A very good life indeed. The years that followed brought the joys and sorrows that make up any long life. There were weddings and births, celebrations and losses. Graham's sister passed away in Kansas, and he made the long journey to attend her funeral and help settle her affairs. One of Natalie's students from her early teaching days became the mayor of Wheatland and credited her with inspiring his love of learning. James married a spirited young woman from a neighboring ranch, and their wedding was the social event of the season. Elizabeth had a difficult birth with her first child, and Natalie stayed with her for weeks, helping her through the recovery. Through it all, Graham and Natalie remained each other's constant. They were partners in every sense of the word, facing life's challenges together and celebrating its victories side by side. The passion of their early years had matured into something deeper and more enduring, a love built on trust and respect and genuine friendship as much as on attraction and romance. In 1910, Wyoming became one of the first states to grant women the right to vote. Natalie cast her ballot with tears in her eyes, thinking of her mother and all the women who had fought for this right. Graham stood beside her, proud and supportive, and later told anyone who would listen that his wife was the smartest person he knew, and of course women should vote. Their grandchildren multiplied over the years, filling the ranch with noise and energy and life. Graham taught them to ride and rope, passing on the skills he had spent a lifetime perfecting. Natalie read to them, told them stories, made sure they valued education and kindness. Together, they created a legacy of love that would extend far beyond their own lives. In 1916, as war raged in Europe and America debated whether to join, Natalie and Graham celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them. They were in their 60s now, their bodies showing the wear of years of hard work and frontier living. Graham's hair was fully silver, his hands gnarled with arthritis. Natalie moved more slowly than she once had, and her eyes were not as sharp as they used to be. But they were still them, still together, still in love. They rode out to the spot where Graham had found Natalie all those years ago. It was not something they did often, but every few years they made the pilgrimage. The road had been improved over the decades, but you could still see where it dipped down through the valley where the attack had happened. 30 years, Natalie said, dismounting with Graham's help. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. I know what you mean. Graham tied the horses and came to stand beside her. I can still see you so clearly, crawling through that mud, refusing to give up. You were so brave. I was terrified, Natalie corrected, but I kept moving because my father told me to survive. I am glad I listened to him. I am glad you found me. So am I. Finding you changed everything for me, gave me a purpose beyond just surviving, you know? You made me want to build something to create a legacy. Our children, our grandchildren, the ranch, all of it exists because you said yes to me. Natalie took his hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. We built it together. That is what matters. We were partners in all of it. They stood there for a long time, two people who had faced the worst life could throw at them and had come through it stronger. They had lost loved ones, faced financial hardship, weathered storms both literal and metaphorical. But they had never lost each other, and that had made all the difference. You ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different? Natalie asked. If the wagon train had not been attacked, if you had ridden a different route that day, sometimes, Graham admitted, but I try not to dwell on it. We got the life we got, and it has been a good one, better than good, extraordinary. Yes, Natalie agreed softly, it really has been. They rode back to the ranch as the sun began to set, painting the Wyoming sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. When they arrived, they found the house full of family. Thomas had come with his wife and children. Anna was there with her husband and their growing brood. James and his wife had brought their young daughters. Elizabeth had come from town with her son. Even Matthew, now studying law at university, had made the trip home to celebrate his parents' anniversary. The evening was filled with laughter and food and stories, the kind of gathering that made life worth living. Natalie looked around the table at all the faces, all the lives that existed because she and Graham had found each other, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed or headed home, Graham and Natalie sat on their porch one last time. It had become their ritual, ending each day together under the stars, talking or sitting in companionable silence. 30 more years, Graham asked, a teasing note in his voice. Natalie laughed. That would make us over 90. I'm not sure our bodies will hold up that long. Then however long we have got, Graham said, his tone turning serious. I will take every day I can get with you, Natalie Lawson. Every single one is a gift. Every day with you is a gift to me too, Natalie said. She leaned against him, feeling the solid strength that was still there despite the years. I love you, Graham. Thank you for carrying me when I could not walk and for walking beside me ever since. I love you too, more than words can say. He kissed the top of her head. Come on, let us go to bed. Tomorrow is another day and I want to spend every moment of it with you. They went inside together as they had done thousands of times before. The house was quiet now, everyone asleep, the day's celebrations over. But the love that filled that house, the legacy they had built, would endure long after they were gone. As Natalie drifted off to sleep in Graham's arms, she thought one last time about that terrified young woman in the mud. She hoped that woman would be proud of what she had become, of the life she had built from the ashes of tragedy. She hoped her father would be proud too, but most of all she was proud of herself. She had survived. She had thrived. She had loved and been loved in return. From the darkest moment of her life had come the greatest blessing. And it all started when a cowboy saw a woman crawling through the mud, and instead of passing by, he stopped and said 5 simple words that changed everything. Stop crawling. I'll carry you now. Those words had been more than a rescue. They had been a promise, a commitment, the beginning of a love story that would span decades and touch countless lives. And Natalie had kept her part of the promise too. She had let Graham carry her when she needed it, but then she had stood up and walked beside him, equal partners building a life together. It was a good story, she thought sleepily. A love story worthy of the Wild West, full of danger and adventure and triumph. But most of all, it was a story of two people who found each other when they needed it most, and who chose to build something beautiful together. And that, Natalie reflected as sleep finally claimed her, was the best kind of story of all.